Welcome to Through the Bible with Les Feldick, a 30-minute walk through the Scriptures, teaching in-depth Bible truths that change people's lives. Now, here's your host, Les Feldick.
Okay, once again, good to see you all back, and number 4, huh? Yeah, this is number 4. We're out of here. For those of you joining us in television, again, I guess you all realize we make 4 of these in a row. We still hear a complaint once in a while that we never change shirts, but that's the reason. I'm not going to go out and try and fool people, but anyway, this is the 4th one this afternoon, and I thought surely that I would finish 2 Peter in this 4 program, but we haven't. But anyway, we're still in book number 55, so if any of you out in television care to order any of these programs, it'll be book number 55, and then the next 4 programs, the next taping, will finish the book, right? And so I imagine that'll still be in 2 Peter. All right. Again, I want to thank our listening audience for your support, your prayers, your financial, and your letters of encouragement. We say it over and over, we hardly ever get a mean-spirited letter. Once in a while, but they're not that bad either. So we just thank the Lord that for the most part, people are accepting our teaching and are gaining knowledge from it. All right, back to 2 Peter. We'll continue where we left off. We're now in chapter 2, and here, of course, I think most of you probably realize that 2 Peter chapter 2 and the little book of Jude are almost word for word the same. So when we get to Jude, we'll probably be repeating a lot of this stuff, but it bears repeating because it is so apropos for the day in which we live, where false teaching is just coming in like a flood. And of course the internet doesn't help, because you can get almost anything you want off the internet. And I think probably this is what's happened to a lot of our preachers, bless their heart. Instead of studying and preparing their sermon, they're just taking the easy way out and click on the internet. And I know my brother has said the same thing, that just read something that comes off the internet. Well, that's a sad commentary, but it's the truth of the matter, and we have to face it. All right, it was no different back here. No different. As I showed in the last half hour, Paul complained in Timothy that everybody in Asia Minor had already turned against him. Why? Because the false teachers came in and came across with something that appealed to the flesh, and then away they go. All right, now Peter is up against the same thing with his Jewish believers, that even among them there would come these false teachers with their pernicious ways and who speak evil of the truth. All right, verse 3. And through covetousness. In other words, again, like we said in our closing moments in the last program, coveting is the beginning of everything. I've always made the statement, and I still say it. You cannot break one of the 10 commandments without coveting first. It's the foundation of all sin, is coveting. All right, and so through covetousness, they will with feigned words make merchandise of you. Now, when you think of merchandise, what do you think of? Come on, say it. Money. Money. So what are they really after? They're after your material things. They're after your money. See? And they'll do it with their false teaching. All right? And so with feigned words, they will make merchandise of you. They'll cash in on you. That's a good way of putting it, isn't it? They'll just cash in on you. Whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation, in other words, their eternal doom, is waiting them. They must never think of it, but it is. Their eternal doom is waiting for them. Now verse 4, here are Peter's reasons for saying what he said. God hasn't changed. God still operates the way he always has. And when he gets to a point where he can take it no more, he drops his wrath and judgment. And it's going to happen again. The world is getting ripe for a new judgment, which of course we think will be the tribulation. The world is getting ripe for it. Every day that these false teachers completely undermine the truth, every day the flesh pots of this world that are capitalizing on the human weaknesses, God's wrath is going to fall. All right, let's go back. Verse 4, for if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. In other words, that started way back, I think, and again, I can expect people to disagree with it, but I think this happened between verse 1 and verse 2 of Genesis, which in verse 1 you have the perfect creation. Let's go back and look at it. Well, it's been a long time since we taught anything from Genesis, hasn't it? Maybe it's about time we kind of refresh people's memory. Genesis chapter 1. And I know that probably 50% of Christendom will disagree with me, but that's their privilege. That doesn't bother me a bit. I always said I'm going to teach it the way I feel. The Lord has opened it up to me. And I'm not certainly going to lead anybody into a lost eternity because of it. But here in verse 1 of Genesis 1, we have in the beginning, before anything ever appeared, God created heaven and earth. Now, the God of this book is not a God that does anything less than perfect, is He? He makes it perfect. And I think the Hebrew word create here, bara, out of nothing, indicated something perfect, without a flaw, see? And then all of a sudden in verse 2, something has happened. There's not a perfect earth. It's not a beautiful earth, but I call it a mess. It's a swamp. It's covered with water. And the earth was without form, and it was what? Void. It was of no use. And darkness was on the face of the deep. In other words, it was covered with water. The sun and the moon and the stars had been blotted out. Everything was back into total darkness. Well, what in the world happened? Well, again, I didn't plan to do this. I hope I can find my verses, honey. But I think it's Ezekiel 28. I certainly didn't plan to do this. But I guess maybe it's for a reason. Ezekiel 28. And this is what I think happened after that beautiful, beautiful creation of verse 1. And when it happened, it's moot. Makes no difference. Ezekiel 28, and we have to start at verse 13. We taught this 13 years ago. Isn't it? Yeah, it's been about 13 years since we taught Genesis on television. All right, Ezekiel 28, verse 13, where God is speaking through the prophet to an individual. And He says, thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Now I always have to stop when I teach some of these things. How many personalities were in the Garden of Eden, not counting God Himself? 3. Adam, Eve, and Satan. Okay? So whoever God is talking to, it's one of those 3. Thou hast been in Eden. Every precious stone was thy covering. And then He names them, the sardius, the topaz, the diamond. All the precious gemstones were commonplace for this individual. They were like a cotton shirt for him. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in the day that thou wast created. So we know we're not talking about a person of the Godhead. We're talking about a created individual. Now verse 14, it tells us who it is. Thou art the anointed cherub, an angel, that covereth or ruleth is a better word in the Hebrew here. Here we have an angel who was ruling and reigning. And God says, I've set thee so. I put you in this place of authority. You were upon the holy mountain of God. Now remember, a mountain in the Old Testament is a kingdom. Now there are no human beings yet when this man or this angel was ruling. It was an angelic kingdom. See, this is before Adam and Eve, of course. But He said, thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. This was your past. You were a ruling angel. God says, I set you there. You walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire, those gemstones up there in verse 13, the diamond and so forth. Verse 15, you were, past tense, you were perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created. What's the next word? Until. For a period of time, this angel was perfect. He was sinless. But there came a time until iniquity was found in thee. Now, God will not stand iniquity without doing something about it in angels any more than humans. All right, now you have to come back to Isaiah. Back to Isaiah chapter 14. Starting at verse 12. Now we find out who this angel was. He names him. Isaiah 14. Verse 12. Isaiah, first of the major prophets. So if you find Daniel, just keep going back toward the front and you'll get through Ezekiel and then Jeremiah and then there comes Isaiah. All right? Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, because of his angelic position as the ruler over that angelic kingdom. How art thou cut down to the ground? Why? Because of iniquity. Thou who dost weaken the nation. So we know we're talking about Lucifer, who we know as Satan, the devil. Now verse 13, here's the past that led up to his fall. For thou hast said in thy heart, I will. He becomes an egotist. And this ruling angel over an earthly, glorious, gemstone-filled kingdom of angels says, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation, which is normally the position of God in Scripture, in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. And now he epitomizes all of his dreams with this statement, I will be like the Most High. What's he trying to do? Usurp the place of God. And what does God say? Oh, no, you don't. Oh, no, you don't. And so what did he do? He cast him down. That's Satan's first casting out, is when he first fell in this rebellion. But now come back with me all the way to Revelation, and we'll see what Peter is talking about. These angels that fell, well, what are they and who are they? Well, we pick them up now in Revelation chapter 12, verse 4. Revelation chapter 12, verse 4. Where in his rebellion and assuming to take over the throne room of God, evidently 1/3 of the angels over whom he was ruling followed him in the rebellion. And here we pick them up. Revelation 12, verse 4. And his tail, that is, the serpents, the dragons, Satan, as he's symbolized in Scripture, his tail drew the 1/3 part of the stars of heaven. Now the stars are the angels. And did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered to devour her child. All right, now then, if you'll just back up a couple pages to the little book of Jude again, right in front of Revelation, we pick up these same fallen angels in verse 6. Now you can put a whole scenario together, hopefully. Here we have this ruling angel over this glorious earthly kingdom which was filled with the gemstones of fire, beauty beyond description. And he had a whole population of angels over which he ruled. But he got proud and lifted up and attempted to usurp God's kingdom and throne and rule. And evidently 1/3 of these angels consorted with him. All right, now verse 6 in Jude. All got it? And the angels who kept not their first estate. In other words, as ruling or being under Lucifer's rule on that original glorious planet, These angels who kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, in other words, they attempted to follow Lucifer in his rebellion, God has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness until the judgment of the great day. All right, now then just back up a few pages to the left and back to 2 Peter, and maybe this will make some sense. Verse 4 again. 2 Peter chapter 2, now verse 4. So if God spared not the angels that sinned, who rebelled against God's authority and attempted to follow Lucifer, but instead he cast them down to hell, to those chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment, in perfect accord with Jude and Revelation. See? All right, now we come to the next event that Peter can relate to. Verse 5. When again the mass of humanity rebelled against the God of creation, and again in their wickedness God had to move in with a judgment. So now 2 Peter 2 verse 5, he spared not the old world, destroyed it with the flood, but saved Noah, the eighth person. Now, you know, this is always mind-boggling to me. Now, you want to realize that there could have very easily have been 4 or more billion people at the time of the flood. 4 billion is the number that I've used over the years, because I had a friend back in the moon space days who was access to computer, and he and a friend of his, just for common interest one day, started out with 2 people, like Adam and Eve, and their offspring, and remembering that they lived for 800-900 years. They had tremendous health and vigor, and putting all those things into the mix, he said you could easily come up with 4 billion people in that 1600 years from Adam to the flood. And to me, it's only less than reasonable that there were at least 4 billion people. And out of 4 billion, not million, 4 billion, how many were saved? 8. Now, that's a pretty small number. It's frightening, isn't it? Frightening. And what does the Lord say? Narrow is the way, and few there be that find it. Broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many go in thereat. It's the way it's always been, see? All right, so Noah, one of the 8, who was a preacher of righteousness. It wasn't that they didn't have a chance. Noah preached for 120 years. For 120 years, Noah proclaimed to that generation, who I feel had as much technology as we do, and I've got reason for thinking that. So it wasn't that he was limited because of communications. And so he let that whole generation know that judgment was coming. And then, as I pointed out when I taught this years and years ago, when the ark was finished and everything was on board and God was ready to release the floodwaters from beneath and above, he gave them how much time? 7 more days. The gangplank stayed down from the ark to the ground for 7 days. For what purpose? That if anybody would wake up and realize that, oh, Noah must be right, they could have gone on board. They could have. The opportunity was there. 7 days. I call it 7 days of grace. How many accepted it? Not a one. Not a one. In fact, I made reference here several programs back. A book that I read about the time I was teaching all this years back by a Lutheran theologian out of, his book comes out of Concordia Publishing. And I'm sure quite a few of my listeners at the time ordered the book. But he made this analogy, that while Noah was building the ark for the 120 years, as huge as that thing was, he must have had some extra hired help, as we'd call it, employees to help in the building of the ark. And they must have heard the old man preach. They must have heard him tell that a flood was coming, and that's what this box was getting ready for, and it would be the salvation for anybody and anything that would come in. But when the box was finished, and the animals are all on board, Noah's family is on board, everything is ready for the deluge, but God says 7 more days. And then he made this. Isn't that exactly the way it is today? People are busy working in the church, singing in the choir, teaching Sunday school lessons, and so forth. And yet when eternity comes, they're going to miss it. It's frightening, isn't it? But true. Frightening, but true. There's going to be multitudes like at Noah's day. All right, and so the flood came, and only 8 survived it out of, I said, 4 billion people. All right? Verse 6, we come up through history here. Now we're past the flood, a little over 200 years, and we're at Sodom and Gomorrah. No, a little more than that. This is after Abraham. So this is almost 400 years after the flood. 200 years to the Tower of Babel, and then another 200 years to the call of Abraham. So that took us up to 2000 BC. So now we're sometime, because Abraham and Lot were the ones that divided the land, and Lot took Sodom, you know. All right, so verse 6, he turned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, utterly destroyed them, making them an example unto those that should afterwards live ungodly, as the Sodomites did. You see what the world is heading for? The same kind of a judgment. Oh, it's coming. People think I'm kidding when I say that almost the whole human race is going to disappear by the time the tribulation ends. All 6-7 billion of the human race is going to go, because it's got to be made ready for His glorious kingdom, and there can be nothing sinful or wicked in that kingdom. And so here's the example, and that's why Peter is using it. Even as God destroyed the iniquity before the flood, even as He destroyed the iniquity in Sodom and Gomorrah, and we all know what that was, and He condemned them with an overflow and a total destruction because of their ungodly lifestyle. All right, then He comes up a little further. Well, He used in the same time frame Lot. Lot, again, just an example of the numbers. Now, we don't know how big Sodom and Gomorrah were, but I'm going to guess 18 or 20,000, because if I remember right, our guide told us when we were in Jericho that Jericho was a city of about 25 or 30,000, and no doubt Sodom and Gomorrah were probably about the same. I'm guessing, but whatever. Out of however many thousand inhabitants were in Sodom and Gomorrah, how many escaped? 1. All I know, the 2 daughters, but nevertheless, for all practical purposes, spiritually speaking, Lot was the only one. And so God delivered the just man. That's what the word means, just here. Doesn't mean only. It means the righteous man, Lot. Even though he was vexed with the filthy manner of living of the wicked. That's what they called it then, and that's what I call it today. It is a filthy manner of living. All right? And so, verse 8, for that righteous man, that godly man Lot, who knew that all this that was going on was utterly wrong, but because of his position, because of his, again, coveting materialism, because you want to remember, Sodom and Gomorrah were prosperous. Sodom and Gomorrah had it made. I hope I can, I don't know, let me second. I have to look a second. Yeah, Ezekiel 16:49. Once in a while I look out. Look out, whatever you want to call it. Ezekiel 16. Yeah, this was Sodom and Gomorrah. Ezekiel 16, 49 and 50. And this is what hooked Lot. He wasn't content to just be eking out an existence with Abraham and his flocks up there in the mountains. Lot got covetous. All right, Ezekiel 16, verse 49 and 50. And this is what makes me think that the world will maintain a certain level of prosperity until the Lord returns. Because the same scenario was before the flood. The Lord himself said it in Luke, I think, 21, that at the time of Noah, what did they do? They married and they gave and married. They builded and they bought and they sold. It was a prospering economy. Well, now look what Sodom and Gomorrah was when they destroyed it. Ezekiel 16, verse 49, Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, abundance of idleness was in her and her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. In other words, they were selfish. They were nothing but me first. Now look at verse 50. And they were haughty, proud. And now we're talking about the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah now, just before they're destroyed. And they committed abomination before me. Therefore, God says, I took them away as I saw good. That was Sodom and Gomorrah. Prosperous, materialistic. They had everything. They weren't wanting for anything. And when you have an abundance of idleness, what does that speak of? Prosperity. Look at Rome before they fell. Why in the world did Rome build all the Colosseums throughout the empire? To keep idle people occupied, because in their wealth they didn't have to work. They had so much wealth that all they did was let the conquered slaves do the everyday labor. And the end result, of course, was Rome imploded. All right, back to 2 Peter. Oh my goodness, 1 minute left. I think, Kat, you turn that thing up. That's what I think you're doing. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 8 again, For that righteous man, dwelling among them, in the midst of all of their wickedness, as well as their material prosperity, in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Now what does that tell you? The man was a believer. He never lost that. But he became materialistic in his thinking. He left Abraham and his flocks and his herds to come down to materialistic, prosperous Sodom and Gomorrah. And as a result, he vexed himself day after day.
Thank you for watching Through the Bible with Les Feldick. Through the Bible is a partner-supported ministry. If this program has been a help to your study of the Scriptures and you'd like to see others enjoy the teaching, your support would be greatly appreciated. Write to us at Les Feldick Ministries, Route 1, Box 760, Kinta, Oklahoma, 74552. Or call 1-800-369-7856. Remember, all programs are available in printed form, audio cassette, and videotape. Be sure to tune in next time to Through the Bible with Les Feldick.